Robots Radio presents...
Welcome everybody to Roll to Cast, the tabletop RPG podcast of both actual plays and interviews. My name is Sean, and I'm joined here around the table by Ellen.
Oh, hello. Good morning, everyone.
And following the finale of Ambrosia Island and the post-season chat that we had, we're continuing our inter-season content with a very, very special guest indeed. He is an award-winning game developer, the co-writer of not only Call of Cthulhu's 7th edition, but also Warhammer 40k's Dark Heresy, and he's currently the creative director of Chaosium. Please welcome everybody, Mr. Mike Mason. Hello, Mike.
Hello, how are you?
So good to have you here. I feel like I should applaud.
Please. Steady on.
Oh, okay.
Get some tentacle sound effects slapping
none for
together.
you then.
Mike, how is everything on your end? I know we've kind of got ourselves at opposite ends of the time zones. You're super late at night and we're incredibly early in the morning.
Yes. Well, I mean, I've had a fun day working on the current project I'm working on, which is well, it's not actually a secret. I'm working on a redevelopment and new editions of what were called the old Lovecraft country books, the books around H.P. Lovecraft's fictional locales, Innsmouth and Arkham and that. So I'm just in the process of redeveloping those books actually at the moment. So I've been spending literally all day working out distances between real places in New England and fictional places in New England, and working out how far away is Arkham from Boston really, and actually trying to nail things down like that, which has been quite laborious.
Well, if you don't, the fans of Cthulhu absolutely will. They'll be whipping out the rulers
They
and
will
checking.
rise from the seas themselves to to criticize you on Twitter.
I'm sure.
That's fantastic. Do you kind of base the locations to a kind of parallel? So, with Innsmouth, I would imagine you go, okay, it must be coastal. Do you kind of plop it over an existing town, or do you kind of put it where nothing is so that you don't get confused?
I try to put it where nothing else is, because then you can kind of sew it into the reality of the world. Because as you know, I'm sure you've heard this before. When you're selling a lie, it's good to kind of hide it in a truth. So putting Innsmouth on the coast, but still having places like Salem and Marblehead, on the same map, gives a sense of familiarity to it. Because I mean, technically, Kingsport, Lovecraft's coastal kind of sleepy, dreamlike kind of port. Is actually based on Marblehead, which is obviously a real place, but having both on the map kind of just seems to make sense, rather than getting rid of Marblehead and calling it Kingsport. Kind of does away with some of the reality.
Right.
So try and mesh it together as much as possible.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
You can see we've messed up by not having the person from England on the podcast from Baby Beard.
Bugger him. It's our turn now.
And Mike, I know what interests me about that is I know you've so you talk about that the new line that you're looking at where you're taking a lot of inspiration from old lines. I know one thing you talked about since being creative director is kind of marrying that relationship between looking at old lines of Cthulhu and like kind of things like the Express and Masks, and but marrying that with how to bring in new fans and how to expand the Call of Cthulhu mythos in new and exciting ways. Have you found that a challenging process to try and marry old with the new in terms of satiating old fans, but also kind of enticing new fans into the fold?
Well, it is a balancing act, and it's not particularly hard. What's hard about it is the timing, because there's myself and Lynn Hardy, who is an associate editor with Call of Cthulhu, and works with me on producing and editing the books. And there's just not enough hours in the day. I mean, you could say I could just literally, myself and Lynn, we could just pump out, new versions, new editions of old material. I mean, the game is 40 years old come Halloween this year. So that's 40 years worth of game material that we have as a back catalogue. So for quite a number of years, we could just sit back and, pump out old stuff, basically. But I think that would be a disservice to, both the game and the fans. So it's a balancing act between putting out some, classic, older material that's refreshed with some more detail and more kind of added value to it, to make it, bring it up to date, really, in terms of, where we are with gaming and Call of Cthulhu, particularly, in this year and the years to come. Balancing that with putting out brand new material that expands the game, expands the kind of settings, and does something different. There are plenty of Call of Cthulhu scenarios around a haunted house kind of concept. So we don't really need to do any new ones of those. So we'll go to the classic material which already exists and put those out to kind of cover our bases with that. But we could be doing new stuff as well. So what we try and do is it's roughly kind of half and half. Half old stuff, half new stuff. It's not quite as accurate as that, but I've just got in to lay out a book called Cults of Cthulhu, which is a brand new book, which is been written by Christopher Lackey, who's one of the co-hosts of the H.P. Lovecraft Literary podcast, and also myself. And that's a brand new book all about the Cthulhu cult, because I was looking back over the 40 years of material. We've never really done a book about the Cthulhu cult. I mean, his name's on the cover, the poor guy. He's never really had a book about him. So, we put that book together, and that's a brand new thing, and that's now in layout. And now, having done that, I'm now doing some old stuff and revisiting the Lovecraft Country stuff. But in the meantime, Lynn is working on a brand new book, which is called Darkness and Decorum, which is basically Cthulhu versus Jane Austen. It's kind of the kind of Regency England and the Cthulhu mythos popping up its head in that kind of era, which is a fairly unique and new thing.
Yeah.
We try. It's about, as I say, it's a balancing act, and we just try and put out the best material we can, really. But that does mean we have to do a lot of work with some of the old material, kind of bringing that up to date with the rules and also kind of the kind of style of play, really, that modern games tend to have, rather than the kind of the old school kind of approach, which were somewhat dungeon-like. Not all of them, but some of them were basically lots of fights. And Call of Cthulhu is kind of a broader game than that. It's fine to have a fight in a Call of Cthulhu game as your end point, but I think we also need to ensure that there are groups that don't want that, and so they're looking for alternative kind of conclusions. So we're often looking to expand the material and to provide a range of possible outcomes for a scenario. So different groups can tackle the scenarios in different ways, and not just be channeled down one kind of railroad ending, which a lot of the early scenarios, because of their limited word count, were kind of forced to do, you see.
I have two questions, Mike. First of all, is the birthday of, the Call of Cthulhu line really on Halloween? And that's excellent. And the second question is, we talked about marrying old and new. Obviously, kind of a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's horror is horror of the unknown, and, coming from a time where there was a lot that we didn't know about the world. Now we know how air conditioners work. Now we know about geometry and imaginary numbers and Euclidean shapes. How do you kind of balance kind of bringing in new fears with the kind of Call of Cthulhu and all the kind of lines that you write for? Or do you think that there's something really lasting in Lovecraft and Cthulhu-esque horror that has always remained? Or do you kind of like walk a line between both, bringing a little bit of new fear and old fear into this delicious bubbling stew?
Well, the first question, the answer is yes. It was born. The first copies of first of the first, the Call of Cthulhu first edition box set. The first copies arrived in the Chaosium office on Halloween 1981.
Oh my
goodness!
goodness!
I do believe. I mean, I could be wrong here because I wasn't there at the time, but I do believe I have heard the story that Greg Stafford, who obviously created Chaosium and ran the company wonderfully for many years before he passed. He, I'm pretty sure there was lightning. There was a lightning storm at the time, so perfect, really, the birth of this thing. But yes, Halloween is what we say is the the anniversary this year.
That is so perfect. I'm almost weeping at the thought. Do you throw it like a birthday party, or do you have some kind of anniversary or bloodletting, some kind of ritual?
Yeah, well, clearly there'll be dancing around strange maypoles or things like that around the world.
Isn't that just what English people do?
I'm going to need photographic footage of that as well, please, Mike.
I hope you'll be involved.
Oh, fantastic!
You'll hear the call.
Yeah, unfortunately, ours is I was going to make a North Pole, South Pole joke there, but I don't understand enough about geography and how the world works. Our pole is just upside down.
So the second question, it's a really interesting question. I mean, fundamentally, we still fear the same things that, people have done throughout history. And, Lovecraft, was on the money when he said the greatest fear is the fear of the unknown. And that still is true. Whether it's, walking down a dark street at night and not knowing what's around the corner or what that figure is at the end of the road or the footsteps behind you is the fear of the unknown. And that still is as effective now as it was, back in Victorian times and before that. So I think, common fears are still completely valid because we have them, and the difference with the kind of the Cthulhu mythos, which obviously is born out of the kind of the concept of cosmic horror, is probably more appropriate and apparent today than it probably was in Lovecraft's time in the early 20th century. The fear and effects of alienation on the individual and on communities, the fear of disempowerment, inability to change things, to feel that the world is against you. And if you add on the concept of the kind of cosmic horror on top of that, the whole universe is against you.
Yeah.
And at times in the modern era, it does feel that everything is against us sometimes. We're only just coming out of the pandemic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Things beyond our control. 5 years ago, things beyond our control. We can handle everything. Well, it's clearly life has demonstrated that that's not true. And it only takes one big meteorite to come in our direction, and things are going to change. So I think those, the fears are still valid. They're still appropriate, and I think even more so in today's world in that sense. So I don't, in a game sense, that's the kind of the underarching kind of foundation to horror and fear. In a game sense, what you're looking to do is manipulate those and to express those through the the design of the scenarios and the gameplay. And obviously what you're trying to do is come up with creative and inspired and new examples of it. Obviously, as I've said, there's only so many times you can run a haunted house scenario for your group before they go, we give up. We don't want any more.
We'll become the ghosts.
Which is completely fair. And so it's one of the things when we're doing new material is looking for something a little different, something expressed in a new way or a new idea. So maybe it's using an old hat monster, as it were, but doing it in a new and strange way that will make it unusual and potentially, scary for the players because they won't expect it to, or they won't understand what's happening in that way. So it's all about trying to be creative with the material in that sense.
Was that sort of line of thinking in terms of finding new ways to excite, new ways to bring Cthulhu into the public space, how Pulp Cthulhu came about? Or what actually was the inspiration behind bringing that supplement? Because I know you had a big hand in bringing Pulp Cthulhu to the fore, and I was interested by the inspiration and kind of the process of how that book came about.
Pulp Cthulhu is a it's got a real tale behind it in a sense, because it's a book that was something like 10 years or more in the making. Originally, the actual idea for Pulp Cthulhu came from a colleague of mine who still works at Chaosium, and he was working with Chaosium back then in the day. It's a guy called Dustin Wright who works behind the scenes. He's our distribution, warehousing, customer service. He wears many hats and keeps the wheels rolling internally in terms of making sure product arrives on shelves and through people's doors and all that kind of thing. So he's kind of a real kind of essential person in the team, and obviously he's been with Chaosium a very long time. He's in fact the oldest serving member of Chaosium, and he actually came up with the idea. I think literally he'd been to watch Indiana Jones and came out and went,
that.
Well, you
That'd
say
be kind of good, wouldn't it?
As you describe him, it kind of sounds like he is underground somewhere with like all these strange. It almost sounds like a Lovecraftian job.
He's an outer god.
Yeah, like he's got like all these gears and mechanics, and like I don't know, it makes the coffee warm and the sheets pile up on the desk just like they're meant to. But you're like, oh, we never know where they come from. They just do.
Justin is a wonderful guy. Does many things, but yeah, no, he had the idea, and like many games companies in the early days, they start thinking about a book, and they'd mention it publicly and say, even put it in the back of a book saying, "Oh, coming soon, Pulp Cthulhu," and then 10 years passed and it still hadn't come out. Some work had been done on it back in the day. And then what happened was the Kickstarter for the 7th edition of the game, one of the stretch goals was, hey, why don't we do that Pulp Cthulhu book? We'll get around to doing it. And I was like, well, that would be great. Yeah, let's do it. Thinking that, there's a book, there's a manuscript on a hard drive somewhere that's just, been gathering dust, and I'll just need to kind of, give it a brush up and, be ready to go. So it got funded, and then came to me to kind of put it together. So I managed to dig out what files I could on the game, and there wasn't a lot. There was a scenario, and there was a little bit of material on one of the investigator organizations that ended up in the final book, the Vanguard Club.
Yeah,
and they were all kind of pretty much all done and written. And there was a kind of a bit of a half-hearted stab at doing some rules, but literally
maybe this.
I'm laughing now because as I read it, my mouth dropped, because literally the rules were, hey, if you want to do, the players want to do something kind of, action pulpy, and well, just let them. And that was kind of.
Oh, that would be a fantastic book.
Did I write that? Because that sounds exactly like the TTRPG that I would write.
Hey, you want to do this? Do it.
What's the rule? Wouldn't it be cool if this?
Yeah, it's quite. It's a good foundation in terms of the scope of what to work on, but it doesn't really give you anything to play with. So I had to kind of, I had to kind of design the rules from scratch, really. So the whole book, I literally had one organization and one scenario. That was what I had. So the rest of the book, I had to, find a way to kind of put together and write. So I brought in some colleagues. Paul Fricker helped develop some of the rules with me, and we brought in some other people to help, fill out some new scenarios and some other material. And the book was, the book came to life, but it was very much a case of finding making it work alongside the 7th edition rulebook. So it needed to, its rules needed to layer in a fairly seamless way. But also, I very quickly kind of determined that, if you ask anyone what is pulp, everyone will give you a different answer. And so calling a book, Pulp Cthulhu and saying this is pulp is kind of asking for trouble. So hence why in the kind of the material, I kind of said, look, there are 3 levels of pulp, and you can dial your game to whatever level you think pulp is for you and your group.
The pulpometer. So
there's kind of the pulpometer, exactly. So you have a kind of like as I say, the kind of low level is Call of Cthulhu Plus with slightly tougher characters. You can do a little bit to the high pulp, where they've got these talents that give them kind of these edges and special abilities and so on. And but the whole concept was to try and make it a very much like a toolkit that you would take from it what you needed for your game to make it work and run in the way that you wanted to run it. And that's really the heart and soul of what pulp was about, really.
I know that you said it's a flawed question, but what is Pulp Cthulhu to you? Like, you said you want to dial it appropriately to how you kind of want to play. If you are playing Pulp Cthulhu, or I guess with making the kind of the pulpiest setting, as it were, you would be envisaging. Oh my god,
envisaging.
Yeah, thanks. That style of play. So for you, when you would sit down to, like, if you were to sit down to run or play a game of Pulp Cthulhu, what's that level of pulp that you're sitting
What's
at?
the Mason pulp?
Yeah.
The Mason level of pulp is super high.
Yes.
If you're going to play pulp, then go for it. So
oh god.
when I'm a player, it's like in pulp you have the ability to spend luck points on rolls and change things and all that kind of thing. I just blow my luck as quickly as possible, because I will just blow it and go like, I want to do that, and then I want to machine gun the octopus, and do that, and I want to dive on the chandelier and fly across the room and jump on top of the shoggoth and wrestle it, and because to me that's a very kind of different game to Call of Cthulhu in a sense. I want to play to the pulp aspect, so and when I'm running it, I really try to encourage the players to really let their hair down with it. And, I try to reward, that kind of two-fisted kind of action, pacey kind of game style. If players are coming up with crazy ideas that are really unfeasible, I will go, let's give it a try.
You can certainly try.
I'm on the. I think I enjoy that kind of thing, and it makes running Call of Cthulhu and playing Call of Cthulhu, the classic game, a different experience. That's slower, darker, a bit grimmer kind of thing, a little bit more. We're not going to win. I mean, the first time I played, I play tested a scenario written by somebody else, and they were running it, and I was playing in the game to play test it. I remember, towards the end, I kind of in the back of my mind knew who this kind of villainous NPC was. I thought I did. But I thought, well, heck, I'm going to do it. So I thought the villain was Neil Athertep, this outer god in human form, and so I decided to punch him in the face, and I did in fact punch Neil Athertep, and then he ate me. I think that's pretty much how it happened. But that's what it's about.
What a way to go.
I thought you were going to say, and it turns out I just punched a guy. I think what's fascinating about that to me is how that you made Cthulhu accessible to me, because we take turns being the GM and the keeper as part of our podcast each season. When it came time for mine, I originally picked up the tome that is Call of Cthulhu, and I was fascinated by it because I had it, and I had a friend that absolutely adores the system, but I never got a chance to play it. And I was wondering, well, what's my in? Because I didn't feel that kind of style was my forte. And then someone mentioned Pulp Cthulhu to me, and that just opened up a whole avenue of possibilities as someone who grew up with Indiana Jones, and we are the house of Brendan Fraser, so we all love The Mummy.
Yeah.
And you talk about the level of pulp. This is a season that gave us a New York Italian mobster, an Irish muscly priest, a Norwegian engineering inventor, and a French
bon vivant
actor. and then about 1 billion NPCs on my end. So I think it's great because you've opened up a door for people to really just go absolutely balls to the walls nuts, and I think that's such a good in to Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that was part of my kind of I guess design concept, was to say that, look, I'm a game. I've been playing games for many years. I play all sorts of games, and there are some games that I love, some games I'm happy to play, and some games that just leave me cold. They just do nothing for me. And I'm aware there are people, strange as it may be, who don't get Call of Cthulhu. Who don't, it's not the game for them, and that's absolutely fine and cool. There are plenty of the games they can play. However, if you can dial the aspects of Call of Cthulhu, to make it a slightly different game experience, a slightly different style of play, and Pulp seems to be the most appropriate way to do that. Then obviously you as you say, you're giving people an opportunity to experience the kind of the fun of Call of Cthulhu, but in a slightly different version of it. And there are people that love Pulp Cthulhu, but they're not really happy to run straight Call of Cthulhu, and vice versa. Some people are purists and love playing straight Call of Cthulhu, and Pulp's not for them. And it's just another option. It's just another potential way to people can enjoy the material that we put out. Because obviously, with Pulp Cthulhu, as I always say, the beauty of it is you can apply it to anything we put out. Even if it's a scenario or a campaign for straight Call of Cthulhu, you can pulp it up if you wish. It works both ways in that way. So it's just about trying to be flexible and versatile, I think.
It's certainly a great way of re-examining horror from a different perspective, because I know in our campaign we had a very tense scene where two of our characters were getting the villain monologue. But they just didn't care, and then they had to kind of go 1-2 with was it a ghast, Sean?
A ghast, yes.
Yeah.
So I Mike, there was a portion of the season where Sean, the keeper, was finding himself a little bit frustrated that his straight villain was being overrun by these two bombastic players, and they didn't care about his monologue. So I was flipping through the book, going, "Okay, what creature can I throw at you that's not going to a ghast?" So that was a lot of fun.
But it's and we've just come from playing. We've played both Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red, and we were talking about the difference between them, and overwhelmingly what we found is that Cyberpunk Red is just a bit more empowering, whereas 2020 you kind of want to play a game where you're under the boot of some corporation, and it is a bit Cthulhu-esque in that you know there's probably not going to be a happy ending. The impact that you're going to make is probably going to be very small and possibly overwritten by a big corporation, but you just got to give it a go anyway. Whereas Red, it's kind of more, you can actually probably start to make some pathways and make some influences in this world. And for me, certainly, I felt like Pulp Cthulhu was a way of kind of going, oh, what's this? Cosmic horror? Pah, I've got stuff to do. So it felt like and especially in a time of a lot of unease and uncertainty, it was a very empowering and fun way to kind of laugh in the madness of it all.
Yeah, no, I think what you just said is spot on. I think the analogy with the different versions of Cyberpunk is very valid in comparing Call of Cthulhu with Pulp Cthulhu. It's very similar. Call of Cthulhu. You may win the day, but it will be probably a Pyrrhic victory or minor, and then you'll be horribly scarred forever by it, probably. Whereas Pulp Cthulhu, as you say with Cyberpunk Red, it does give the players more agency. It does give them more ability to kind of narrate the story in the direction they want to take it, simply because they can affect the roles in a much more proactive way with luck. Avoiding death or going out in a blaze of glory, all these kind of mechanics that kind of are aimed to kind of give the player control over how their character how their character story goes, whether it continues or even if it ends. But they can control the ending as well by by the mechanics and the options that they have. They can they can have an impact. Their death can have a meaning, not just the kind of the cold, gritty deadness of a standard game where oh, you're dead, that's it, goodbye, move on. So that was kind of ingrained in it, and yeah, that very much about that kind of player agency, giving players the option to, as I say, kind of gear the story towards the story they want to tell. That's how I always often think about it.
You talk about things being ingrained, and so I'm interested to talk about how not only Call of Cthulhu, but storytelling and tabletops in general have become ingrained in you. I know you talk about a story where you rock up to a party in the 80s where what you thought was a party ended up being just a friend and a couple of siblings, and you play D&D for the first time, and that was I love that in and of itself.
And this was the hard stuff,
this
right?
This was
like
D&D
first edition.
This is like, this is well, in fact, I have vague memories of it now, but I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. To be honest.
No!
I mean, all I remember is there was some really cool skeleton miniatures on these cardboard floor plans, and there was these, there was a wizard miniature and a fighter and a cleric and all that. I think I played a fighter. I think, and it was mind blowing. I mean, I just came away going, I don't know what that was, but it was brilliant, and I really loved the miniatures. Where can I get them?
Wow.
And it just had all these questions with all these questions that were all really positive. That was great. What is that?
Was it the mystery of what tabletop is that kind of enticed you into it? And if that's the case, what made you stay for so long? Because you've got a career that spanned several decades now. What has been kind of the aspects of tabletopping in general that has drawn you towards it, and what kind of fuels your passion for it continually over time?
I guess there's two things. First of all, the academic in me would say it's the story. I love stories. I love particularly horror stories. I've been reading horror stories and watching horror films since a very, very early age, and so it completely, this was the game for me because it clicked. But role playing in general, it was like kind of telling these stories and these stories without an end. These stories that kind of were about your characters and the fun of kind of wandering into this room full of skeletons and then like, oh no, what are we going to do? And the cleric turns them, and it was just fun. The other aspect, which I think, as I grow older, I sort of see it more and realise more about it, is actually it's about this the social aspect of role playing. There's not many activities that humans can do that actually means that you meet up with a group of friends, possibly every week or whatever variation of how you meet up, but you meet regularly, you get together, you socialize, and you focus on some shared entertainment, basically, in a very interactive way. Other than going down the pub regularly and meeting your mates down the pub, there's not really many other activities unless you're engaging in a sport or something like that, perhaps. But other than that, there's not a lot else. And this is I love the social aspect of role playing. I love whether it's obviously meeting in person around the table is wonderful, but even in the last year or so, just getting online and being able to kind of chat with people and game with people, on Hangouts or whatever, there's been a godsend, really, not only for me but for many other people who have been without the ability to kind of get out and socialize. It's been a fantastic. The game forces you to meet, is what I'm saying, and it forces a socialization. It forces this kind of community. In a good way, I use the word force, but it's not probably the right word. But it gives you a reason to get together on a regular basis with a group of people, and when you then apply that to the greater kind of role-playing community, gaming community, and you take the step of maybe going to game conventions, you realize there's many people who are just like you, and I've made so many friends through role-playing, through going to conventions over the years, who have become, solid, best friends of mine, and none of that would have happened unless, if I hadn't played that game back in the early 80s. Played D&D.
Fantastic. You never had a chance, did you, to not? Because that's the hard stuff. That's not a gateway TTRPG. That's a
hard
portal.
That's a hard drug.
Yeah. Kind of sidestepping a little bit. I mean, we're talking about obviously the strengths of TTRPGs and what they can do. Obviously, the social factor is a wonderful one. I work in theatre, and so quite often when I'm writing a piece or when I'm writing a specific genre, one of the kind of rebuttal questions is why theatre? Why this medium for this genre? And you being such a big fan of horror, why does horror suit TTRPGs so well? Because it really does. We've there's horror elements in our Pulp Cthulhu game. We've just done Kids on Bikes, which is also I guess bleeding over because there's cosmic horror in there too.
Yeah.
And we played Vampire the Masquerade as well, which is this beautiful, tense paranoia kind of pervading the whole game. But what do you think that TTRPG does for horror so well and will continue to over movies, over video games, over any other kind of medium?
Because it's not passive. It's when you're reading a book or you're watching a movie, you can get a chill. You can get a jump scare in a movie, or it can leave you, pondering and slightly uneased and or disgusted. And similarly with a fiction book, it can provoke you in some way. But it's a passive experience, whereas role-playing, it's an interactive experience. And so, particularly with horror, you get to kind of tell a story, but it has a kind of a potential to have an impact, in a good way. And the role-play kind of aspects of horror allows you to play with themes and concepts that you wouldn't really do anywhere else. It's a safe environment, and it's and I'm not, there are some groups that will, want to explore quite, dark and grim subjects in their, the privacy of their own gaming group, and that's cool. Equally, there are people that, don't want to be that dark and grim, but they want to kind of have the kind of the fun scare, the kind of the enjoyment, the mystery. They want to get into the mystery and kind of then have that moment where the penny drops and the realization of what they're up against hits them, and it's like, oh my God, no, and then they've got to deal with it. It can be quite an enjoyable experience. But it does come back, to what I said earlier about, there are people that love horror, and enjoy it and have and find it a fun experience, like myself. And equally, there are people that don't like it at all, and they want to play, a more kind of fantasy type game or a hard science fiction or something like that, and that's cool as well. But I think horror it allows you to play with things, and having play against interesting characters, villainous characters that you want to love to hate on, and that kind of thing, So I think it's all those kind of things in a way.
One thing that also interests me about that is looking at your career and what you've dabbled into. I say dabbled; it's decades worth of a career. Obviously, you've been freelancing with Cthulhu for the better part of 2 decades or so, and you've hustled and you've made content for fans and then freelance for Chaosium before 2013 when you started jumping with them full time. I know previously, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up, Chris, our other baby beater, is an avid fan of Dark Heresy, and I know obviously you worked as the line manager for Black Industries, and so you're one of the co-writers. and that's another world that's so incredibly dark and yet so bombastic and so over the top in a lot of aspects. What was it that drew you to that property, and what was it like working with the first edition of Dark Heresy? Because again, this is the game where you have a plethora of crit tables where there's tables for each body part, and then different types of impacts that will do something to that body part. It's quite prolific, and I'm just intrigued about that process as well.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I worked on Dark Heresy and Black Industries, I already worked at GW. I already worked at Games Workshop. I worked on the sales side for some time. I actually originally joined Games Workshop to be their event manager, because my background is in kind of my long background. I did a drama degree, so my background's theatre.
Well, you're one better than us, because we have advanced diplomas in acting. So
obviously I could then get no work acting or directing, theatre clearly, and so I used my talents to move into kind of promotions and events. So I worked in events and promotions quite a long time in kind of business. And just by chance, I saw an advert for Games Workshop wanting an events manager, which was like, well, I kind of know about gaming. I know about Games Workshop. I've been playing their games since they started. And I also know about running events. So maybe I could do this job. So I applied for that job. And long story short, I got it. And so I worked running Games Workshop's games days and all that kind of stuff for a few years. And at this time, Games Workshop had decided to kind of get back into board games and role playing with Talisman and Dark Heresy. And so I just internally joined the playtesting of the Dark Heresy game. And I saw a first draft of some of the material, and I didn't think it was hitting the nail on the head. And I knew the manager of the Black Library, which was kind of the home of Black Industries, and I kind of made my thoughts known on why I didn't think the game was going in the right direction. From behind the scenes, I kind of helped to, I guess, I helped to kind of redirect where the game was going. And around that time, funnily enough, they decided they needed a manager for the Black Industries, and so I applied, and I got the job. Then I had 3 months to put the game out. The game was more or less written by colleagues who had started the project, and but it wasn't finished. And so I had 3 months to kind of finish the book and get it all together. So I mean, that's how it all happened. And
oh my goodness.
But I mean, the whole thing about Warhammer 40,000, as with anything with Warhammer from Games Workshop, it's based on a very kind of at the heart of it is English humor. It's based, it's like, what's the darkest, most awful thing that could be, and how do we make that funny? How do we make that so over the top that nobody could really think that we believe this? It's kind of it's, and so Dark Heresy and Warhammer 40,000, it's a grim, dark future. There's always war. There's all this going on. It is tongue in cheek. I mean, if you look carefully in Dark Heresy, in the first edition, there are jokes. There are there's one of the jokes. I mean, the trouble is, I know what they are because they're English jokes. So if I say to you, one of the characters in their equipment list, they have 4 candles. So that's funny to me because in the 1970s, the Two Ronnies did a sketch all about this bloke going into a hardware shop for 4 candles.
Right.
And
so
the shopkeeper thinks he wants 4 candles. And no, he doesn't want 4 candles. He wants fork handles. The things are going, and there's a whole sketch built on the kind of this wordplay.
Right.
Phil's screaming at us right now.
Well, what we should do is we should edit out you explaining that, and then just cut to us going
laughing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a passage about psychers that's got strange bold women I can't remember the actual quote now, but basically, it's a it's a little Easter egg to June. It's the Bene Gesserit.
Yes.
So there's lots of little in jokes in throughout. These kind of a lot of the Warhammer and Warhammer 40k products, and so Dark Heresy was an extension. I mean, of course, the problem with Dark Heresy was. While we all know what a Space Marine does, they go out and shoot things,
yep.
and all the other alien races, what they do is they go out and they shoot each other. That's what they do. But Dark Heresy isn't a game about that. It's a game about what happens behind the war. What's happening on the home worlds, what's happening on all these production planets, and of course, none of that really has ever been described, other than some fiction. Some of the Black Library fiction kind of talked about some of these aspects, but nobody actually put it into a book, really. And so we were having to kind of come up, well, what does the average person who's not in the war, in a war, do in the 40k universe? Is there bars? Is there spaceports? And trying to work it out. What's a 40k version of a spaceport look like?
As an Aussie, there will always be bars and pubs. There must be.
We will find them.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was fun to work on, but a fairly desperate kind of 3 months to get it out, and then get the other stuff that followed. But so it was a fun experience, and certainly I learned a great deal doing that.
See, Sean, it's not so hard for us struggling actors and
to get into
drama
event management.
People.
Yes,
we just go into promotions. We make some really insightful comments. We have a deep understanding of how games work. We make some great insightful comments, and then bingo bango.
You're the creative director for Chaosium.
We're set. I'm very curious because obviously we all have dramatic backgrounds. Now that I'm a bit more into my career, I studied as an actor, and now I'm kind of becoming a bit of a playwright. But I find that quite often I write a bit arse backwards as a result of it. I'm much more interested in in-depth character stuff, kind of long character building scenes as opposed to kind of overall plot. Do you find that your experience with studying drama has kind of influenced what you like to write, or how you kind of go about writing? Are you kind of character first and foremost, or do you like the settings and the worlds and the genres?
I have to be honest and say it is probably character driven. It tends to be either a dramatic event, something happens that sparks the rest of the scenario, like a meteorite lands, example or whatever. That and the characters for me are what are the heart of the scenarios. All the dressing, all the other stuff is kind of secondary to me in that sense, because to me, if you haven't got really interesting characters and you haven't got a dynamic event and series of events that drive the game, that drive the players to interact and motivate them to kind of get involved, then it's pretty hard to do it if you haven't got those things. So for me, that very much drives it. And the other side to this is what is really where I started. Is I guess my kind of drama experience is what has informed me as a GM over the years, and that kind of sense of trying to create drama in the game. So if you create drama, then players can react to it and invest in the game. And so I'm also aware of things like trying to shut up and let other people talk. Like when you're doing improv, you need to shut up and listen sometimes. So, as a keeper, that's equally true. As a GM, that's equally true. You need to be quiet sometimes and let your players do the talking. So I'm conscious, particularly when online play, I'm conscious. I will often say, right, I'm going to shut up now because I've been talking and I've been talking far too much. You lot talk now, kind of thing.
Yes, the 2 rules of improv: yes and shut up.
Exactly.
Yes and shut up. Perfect.
And that's interesting as well when we look at some of the other things that you've done with Chaosium and what Chaosium has delved into in general, which is the Alone Against the Flames, which is an aspect. And it's interesting because we talk about how it can be hard, not even just in COVID times, but just in general, it can be hard as you're growing up and even in adulthood, finding people to play with. And some people don't have that luxury. And so Alone Against the Flames allows for a one-person role-playing experience. Was there, what has been your experience in kind of developing that? And have you, and finding the necessity for gaming by ourselves and normalizing that as well, being able to, have a game with yourself, and that is something that is completely valid and important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to kind of say it was all my idea, but it wasn't. I mean, originally back in the day, back in the I guess mid '80s, mid to late '80s, Chaosium put out a number of kind of solo adventures. They did yes. 2 or 3 for Cthulhu and 3 certainly for RuneQuest. And, at the time, I bought them, I played them, I enjoyed them, and while I was still playing, with my, group from school and all that kind of thing. And over the years, I mean, obviously, I've been playing Cthulhu for a long time. And so I've been interacting with the community a long time, whether it's through conventions and back in the day, online news groups and then forums and then things like Discord and all that kind of thing. So I've kind of, been dipping in and out all those for many years. So, and part of that has been, an interest in the game and an interest in what people say, that how they interact with the game. And, I've been conscious for a long time that there are plenty of people that buy Call of Cthulhu books who never play the game, but they enjoy reading them as as part of, and their enjoyment comes from that. And so I think the solo plays, I was really keen to bring them back. And actually it was a conversation with the guy who wrote Alone Against the Flames, Gavin Inglis, who he kind of suggested, I could write a solo and, and we could maybe gear it to, to try and introduce the game, introduce the rules for the game. I thought that was a brilliant idea. So I just said, yes, let's do that. And that kind of, because in the back of my head at the time when we did that, originally we released it as a standalone thing, but I knew at some point I wanted to do a starter set for people that had either, never played Call of Cthulhu or never role played before. And putting a solo in the box as the kind of the first thing you literally kind of do when you open that box was, to me, the kind of the real gold dust, because you buy a box game, particularly a role-playing game, you take it home and you open it up and you read the book and you realize, oh no, I can't do anything. I need to invite 3 or 4 friends.
I need friends.
I need friends, and they're not here now. And it's a kind of like an initial barrier that you kind of leave. Oh, I wanted to do. I thought we could play this tonight, and I can't. Oh no. So having that solo, that means you can get home, you can actually play the game. You can play it on your own and you can get a real sense for it and get a sense for that. Did I enjoy it? Great. I want to do more. I didn't really enjoy that. I'll have a look at it, but I'm not sure it's my thing. But it really gives you a chance to get a taste for what the game is about. And so that was the kind of, my motivation behind it. And then, subsequently we've done, Alone Against the Dark, Alone Against the Tide, and we've also put out Alone Against the Frost because they're great introductions to the game, and they're perfect for when you're either you haven't got a game, you're between gaming groups, or you haven't got a gaming group yet, and you want to experience the game and have a bit of fun, and that's a great way to do it. Or it's just maybe tonight the gaming group couldn't meet, or you're ill in bed and you want to do something and you're bored, and that just makes the game accessible. And one of the things I've been trying to do is, whilst servicing and ensuring that, your standard role player, your role-playing groups have got material and adventures and campaigns to get into and have fun with, trying to make the game as widely accessible as possible. So, the solo plays are one part of that. Putting out adventures that only require, one GM and one player, with a book like Does Love Forgive? Looking at doing shorter play scenarios, so it's not just because not everyone's got 4 hours or multiple sessions of 4 hours to available. With real life and everything. So putting out scenarios that only take an hour or 2 hours to play means you can get a full game in, on an evening with relatively little to no prep. So all these kind of combinations of different kind of variations on how you can play the game, I think is important to to make it as accessible as possible. And hopefully there's a version of format of the game that suits you this week. It may be something different next week. It may be that you've got a bunch of friends next week and you can run a full game or something or whatever. But this week you're on your own, so solo plays are what you're going to do. So it's really trying to make things as flexible and as engaging as I can, I guess.
It's a good appetizer for what is to come.
That's a way to look at it.
Yeah, as we kind of are winding down slowly here, there are two things I wanted to touch on. First of all, just as a quick question, because we're talking about friends.
Are you our friend now? I thought that's where you were going to go.
I remember listening to an interview that you did a couple of years ago, and you mentioned how, after this interview, I'm heading over to actually play a game with my old gaming group from the 80s. And I want to know, are you still playing with them, your oldest group?
Well, technically, yes and no. Not at the moment.
Oh, no.
We haven't actually played for... Well, it's over 12 months, and partly that's down to, the COVID thing, but actually it all started because of Brexit.
Oh, no.
Oh, God.
It's because one of the people in the group, a good friend of mine who I've been playing Call of Cthulhu with since I started playing Call of Cthulhu with, he used to be the GM, and it's kind of like Jedi. Now I'm the GM, but he's a civil servant, and for his sins, he works in London he was working on London on Brexit, in all the preparation and stuff. So he just turned around and look, I'm just up to here with all this Brexit stuff. I just can't do it. I need, I can't, can we have a break? And I said, yeah, fine. Brexit kind of finally happened after, many years. And then obviously COVID hit. And so even if we wanted to get back, it was, it became a bit impossible. But, in fact, he messaged the other day to say, yeah, maybe in the summer we could do something again. So, that group will always be there and keep going in various fashion, I guess. But yeah.
That was so sweet. That's so sweet. I'd love it if, I don't know if, you'll have progeny, but it's like if you passed down those titles from that game. It's almost like Pendragon or something, and you
all our children shall play.
And then they inherit your characters.
Now, I've got two sons. They're both kind of adults now. One's at university and one's working. But they both role play. They're both gamers in that sense. And my eldest is now running games for his friends down where he lives, and my other son who lives in London. I've got some nephews who also live in London. They all get together every once in a while, and one of them runs Cthulhu or something, and so it has corrupted them all.
Are you harsh on them as keepers? Or
I murder them constantly.
As a result,
I pass the special secret words and books to them, so they now know them. So
there we go. That's the perks.
and the second thing is, I also wanted to open the floor to you, Mike. If there is anything, if you want to talk to the listeners directly, that is upcoming or anything you'd like to kind of spotlight. That you want people to be aware of, whether that's for things you're doing personally or things that Chaosium is working on?
Sure. I think I already mentioned up front. The Cults of Cthulhu book is coming out in a few months' time, as well as the Darkness and Decorum book. The other book we've got coming out is A Time to Harvest, which is a 1920s campaign set around New England and Lovecraft Country, around Arkham. And that's a very kind of tight campaign, whereas a lot of the other campaigns like Masks and so on are kind of world spanning. This takes place in the New England area, so it's much more kind of confined and probably a little easier for a more novice, newer keeper to run in that sense. So that's coming out, and the main thing I guess I'd want to point people to is Halloween and say, it is the the 40th anniversary of the game in Halloween, and we're going to be doing a few things, and we've got a couple of kind of special anniversary kind of things coming out around that time. But more importantly than just saying, there's some anniversary stuff, so go and buy it. What I'm trying to encourage is people just to, either on Halloween or around that time, make sure you play a game of Call of Cthulhu. Just get together. If you're a long-term D&D group, take a break for a night and run the haunted house or whatever, or and if you're a Call of Cthulhu keeper, then maybe get a few people together that never played before. Just introduce the craziness to them as well. But just generally try and get everyone playing the game around Halloween would be a lot of fun, and and share it on social media. Tell us about your game, take a photo, and just kind of get into the kind of a general celebration, really, because it's a fairly big milestone, really, for a role playing game. There's obviously a few older than Call of Cthulhu, but not many, and especially as Call of Cthulhu was the first horror role playing game. It's those horror devotees. It's a time to celebrate. So that's my kind of message is make sure you're playing Call of Cthulhu on Halloween as well as trick and treating or whatever else you do.
But also go and buy it. Before you go, can I ask you one question, Mike?
Yeah.
What scares you most?
Oh,
well.
Australians.
That's your right to fear us. We're horrible.
Very-eyed Australians in the morning. Well, I have a. It's not like a full phobia, but it is a. I think it is a phobia of a sort. I cannot abide slugs. I don't mind snails. Snails are fine, but slugs are like the spawn of Satan. I cannot see a reason for their existence, and they just give me the willies completely. I just can't be doing with slugs. They freak me out. So that's obviously strangely slender men walking around and in shadows, all that will scare me too. But in the real world, slugs freak me out.
But deep in your heart, the horror of slugs is firmly rooted.
That's the squelchiness, the slime is. Oh, it's horrible. Just even thinking about it. Oh.
That's a future Cthulhu campaign.
I know where all those adjectives come from now in the Cthulhu
in the back of the Cthulhu book.
It's just describing slugs.
I just think about slugs and
I think Mike Mason being squeamish and put out may be where we end this podcast. But first and foremost, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us and giving up your Friday night to speak with us. What did you call it? Bleary-eyed Australians. Yeah. We very much appreciate you giving your time.
Great pleasure and much fun talking to you both. So thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Pleasure is all ours.
And until next week, where we have talked about it informally, but we can formally state that now that we have got Cthulhu and the many outer gods just directly behind us.
Subdued for now.
We are heading forth onto a season of Kids on Bikes, which will be GM'd by the very own Ellen Graham.
Hello. As I formally present to you with my top hat and bow tie, even though it's 1970s in Western Australia, so top hat, bow tie, and board shorts, as it were. You can join us in Season 5 of Rollcast, Kids on Bikes, A Mystery Down Under.
That's awesome. Count me in.
Oh, you're in the campaign now, Mike. Ellen furiously writes notes.
And until next week when we begin that particular adventure, I have been Sean.
I've been Ellen.
And Mike, thank you once again for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Roll to Cast Ambrosia Island is a Baby Beard Media production. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all our podcasts are on Spreaker, Spotify, YouTube, and all good podcatchers. You can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/babybeard. Pulp Cthulhu and all associated properties are trademark of Chaosium Inc. Used with permission.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.
Hey friends, this is Robots, the creator of the Robots Radio Podcast Network and host of the two original shows on the network, the Fallout Lorecast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast. These two shows have rocketed up the iTunes charts. They both together have over 150 five-star reviews in only a couple of months, with bite-sized episodes that take you step by step through the background of the games and the game worlds. They're thought-provoking, well-produced, and a lot of fun. I recommend you go check them out at robotsradio.net or on any podcast reader, podcatcher, whatever you use, iTunes, Spotify. Again, that's the Fallout Lorecast and the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, available everywhere.
Ooh, you're still here. In that case, we have to reward you. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy a small little teaser, a taste, an excerpt, if you will, of our upcoming Kids on Bikes season. Take it away, us.
Eric will say, "Oh, hey, Jessica," as he takes his ice cream away from his mouth. "Hey, you look great. Do you want some ice cream?"
Is it going?
Yeah, it's my shout, yeah. It's Australia
Jono.
Day. Surfing competition.
No wonder
Yeah.
you're the town saviour.
I think as he was trailing a little bit behind because the reason that they are so late is that Dickie, like a golden retriever, just has to stop at every cool looking bush and grabbing
pee on it.
stones.
Yeah.
And so constantly he's just grabbing things. It's like, come on, we're going to be late to the beach. And so eventually he'd been kind of trying to regale her with different stories because he just has to talk. So even though he was far behind, he was in mid-story. So just and the Hawkesbury River monster, it makes me think about it. It's 35 feet long. It's about black and grey skin. But the thing is, it's around Hawkesbury. But the thing is, right, is that the indigenous people, they knew all about this monster. And they warned everyone to not go in the river. But there's this one fisherman, he was in the river. And then from underneath, he got burst right in the air and it went 10 feet.
Dickie,
Went
can I
right
tell you
in.
something?
What?
Shut up.
Do you want an ice cream, mate?
He thinks for a moment.
My shout, anything you want on it.
He's he's got his lips, he's shutting up.
So I see the whole walk here, you decide to talk my ear off. But now that a nice person is going to offer you an ice cream, oh my gosh, he's going to pass out. Look, give him...
Hey, Dickie.
Is it okay, Jono?
It's fine. Don't worry
Oh
about
my
it,
gosh,
Jessica.
no wonder you're the town hero. She's kind of curling her hair a little bit.
Just trying to be nice.
Just trying to be nice, just saving kids from the surf. Yeah, could Dickie get a soft serve with lots of sherbet?
Dickie,
Yeah.
man.
And a flake.
Oh, okay. Steve, what he said, mate?